Welcome everybody, this is the Astral Tourist. Today I want to do something a little bit different. Instead of focusing on just one single astral projection experience and organizing several of my Atlantis related experiences into a clearer timeline. Over the years I've shared pieces of these across different episodes. But it's finally time to bring them together into what I'm calling the Oestrol Codex. Now, a quick bit of lore. In one of these projections, I was stopped by an astral guardian and identified as a daughter of Oestrol. Now, whether that points to a literal past life in Atlantis or just a highly specific energetic signature, remember we have these energy signatures / IDs out there. It's a detail that completely shaped how I interact with the environment. Think of this episode as less of a singular travelogue and more of a map, kind of a network. We'll look at what happened in each of my encounters, how they differed, what details stood out independently. Because these experiences span years of my life, you're also going to notice how my own perception techniques evolved. You're getting them exactly as they were recorded at the time, well, my recollection of them. And I'm using my notes as well, because details do kind of slip over the years. Anyway, proof that the way we see Atlantis depends entirely also on our own state of awareness. I mean, remember, we have to interpret our own experiences. And so it's really a deeper exploration of consciousness, and in this case, about Atlantis. Now, some of these experiences connect back to Egypt, and some connect to what I believe were Atlantean records. Some involved portals, some happened years apart. So get ready. This isn't a single Sunday afternoon stroll. It's a collection of experiences that I've had across my lifetime that all connect together regarding Atlantis. And I want to separate them out clearly and see what makes sense. And it's too much for words, really, but I'm going to do my best to share the experiences. My first experiences happened many, many years ago when I was in my late teens and early 20s. During a spontaneous astral projection involving the Sphinx, I found myself inside the Great Sphinx in the astral plane. I'd already done various reality checks and such. I knew how to do that by then. And I was specifically between the shoulder and the chest region. There was a portal there, and I've returned to that portal quite a few times over the years. I haven't tried recently, but it's there. It's in particular dimensions of the astral, like just barely above what I would call like the neutral zone. Like we have the lower astral realms and like the little buffer zone, and then the higher astrals in the 5 and 6 and the 7D. So it's all up in there, but then not too high above, like not into like 12D or something. Okay, so the first time I entered the portal, I walked through the opening, probably more like floated, actually. I don't know why I wrote walked in my notes. And maybe because I was going kind of slow. I was slower back then. I explored more. And I arrived somewhere at the time that I assumed at the time was just ancient Egypt. I thought, wow, I went back in the past. But looking back, I think it was something much larger than the past. So the place felt enormous, ancient, and highly intelligent. And this is why I think so. There were gigantic structures. There were also beings much taller than humans and quote unquote regular sized people all moving throughout the area. It did not feel like some small isolated culture. And this is a big city of massive size. And, nowadays I wonder if I stumbled into a massive network of civilizations that were possibly pre-Atlantean, where multiple cultures coexisted in ways our history textbooks just aren't ready for. There was quite a selection of beings in the area. And so a quick side note for the physics nerds. Relativity already tells us that time isn't a straight line and that observers can experience it differently based on gravity and motion. Some quantum theories even suggest past, present, and future coexist simultaneously. I'm not saying that physics proves metaphysics or anything like that, but these projections I had back then felt less like time travel and more like experiencing different layers of interconnected realities existing right alongside of us. Also, I have had astral projections to the past, and they're usually shorter in length. And these back in the time for me were quite long. So, they didn't act like going to the past usually feels like for me in the astral. They acted like they were all interlaced and connected and, different timelines coexisting together. Also, the whole area had a kind of what I'm calling an Atlantean frequency, despite the heavy Egyptian themes. And I felt that even then, but at the time I don't think I knew how to word it. And I vividly remember this one time I was sitting on a bench next to an older gentleman who gave me some really profound advice. I think he might have been a guide, but I'm not sure. He could have just been somebody wandering around that knew the area quite well. Unfortunately, I didn't write down his exact words. And over time, of course, they faded. A classic astral projection rookie mistake that I still forget. And by then I was quite experienced, actually, but, I still forgot to do that. So that was my bad. But the feeling stayed. Like I can still go back inside that moment and feel his friendship, if that makes some kind of a sense. It felt like he was planting a kind of informational seed or, little matrix nugget or something meant for a future stage of my understanding. And I know all of his intentions were really good. I just don't know what they were anymore. So that's that. But the moment really jolted me. I remember waking up thinking all about that. But anyway, while I was still in the experience, I was exploring some more because, again, this place is massive and I was super curious back then. And I still am today. But anyway, I was flying upwards, trying to get a better view of one of the gigantic statues. And I can't remember what the statue was of. I think it was just a large golden being of some kind. And I assumed it was just cool architecture at first. But as I got closer, the statue actually moved its eyes. And it had a head within a head or something. There was again with the time thing. In one timeline, it's static. But I could almost see the timelines going, or maybe I'm just overthinking it. But there was something within it that moved and followed me with its eyes and its head. So special note for the newbies, in the astral, the art looks back at you sometimes. So the structures did not feel abandoned. They felt aware. I don't remember if this is the first time that a statue looked back at me and tried to just be aware with me like that. But I know over the years, I have experienced other ones that did that. They're still like static, but they're like moving and watching you back. And, I didn't have the advanced perception techniques that I use now. I wasn't always, at the ready to ask particular questions like I do now. But I definitely remembered that, and it made a big mark on me at the time as far as just how I think about things, how I was thinking about them back then. And I also have had a lifelong interest in Egypt, like the Ankhs and the symbolism, particularly when I was younger. Like late teens again, this is when all this stuff was coming up, was in my late teens, like 18, 19. And I remember being deeply disappointed in grade school before all of this stuff. So in grade school, like, I don't remember, 7th or 8th grade or 9th grade possibly. So even before all of this in school, I remember I was getting really excited because I saw in the history book that there was a huge chapter on Egypt, only to be told by the history teacher that we weren't even going to cover it. We were focusing on American history. So I was super disappointed. I had already had like this feeling inside me and connection to Egypt. And then later on, like I said, like in 18, 19, I began having these astral projections to the Sphinx and the portal in the Sphinx. So moving ahead, now for a complete shift here to my late 20s, mid to late 20s. I had moved to California in the Mount Shasta area. And I had a projection into a lower, heavier astral environment, like out there in the deep woods. And I kind of just, by exploring around, stumbled upon what felt exactly like a charismatic, joyful church service. The emotional energy in there was incredibly uplifting. It was only ever on Sundays, too, by the way. And filled with what I perceived as angelic presences at the time. I could hear the beings singing, angels or not, whatever they were. I could hear it, and it was just, nirvanic. And I was able to return there, I don't know how many times, maybe 8 or 9 or something. I lost count after a while. I wasn't able to make it every time because I didn't have full control, but I made it back there quite a bit, and I would always try to sleep in on Sunday so I could astral project in that direction and hope to find him again. So anyway, one of the times I was there, a woman approached me, complimented my energy. I was attempting to sing with the quote-unquote angels and stuff, and asked if I wanted to see somewhere really special. If I thought that was good, she was going to show me way better, right? So she had a really, really remarkably high vibrational energy about her. She's bright white aura and all of this stuff. So I figured, why not? So we took off, and she was guiding me as we were flying. She didn't use a portal, which I was already wondering, why isn't she using a portal if we're going this far? But she didn't want to use a portal. I don't remember why. And we flew across the whole United States. So, this is from California, all across the Midwest, and then on over the Atlantic Ocean. And we touched down on an island. And it was definitely Atlantis. I think that she was telling me about it, and that's how I knew. But I had this deep inner knowing. This is Atlantis. And I remember thinking, this is just a small island. How can this be Atlantis? But it was really clear that it was. And one of the first things I saw as we were coming down to stabilize on the ground was a massive rotating machine turning, I think it was counterclockwise, kind of like a giant futuristic Ferris wheel with various mechanisms in it. There were beings moving around the area. I couldn't quite make out their exact forms. A lot of them had these bright white auras, like this lady did. And I hadn't mastered true form perception yet. And so my brain defaulted them to looking human, even though I had the sense that not all of them were. So what is true form? A true form is a command I use when I want to like tell my brain, see this being as they actually are, not as how I'm currently translating how they are. So I didn't really have that down yet, but I knew that they were different. So I entered a building just when I was exploring around, a high-tech looking building filled with advanced technology. But this building did not look mechanical like the outside machine did from when I first came in with the lady there. This was different. This was very futuristic looking. It did not have wires or gears that I could tell. It looked fluidic. I should say almost like fluid. Like I knew in my mind and my soul that this was not water. So I say almost like liquid. But it was simultaneously computational. There were the super thin screens, which back then were not super common in computers. So, and there were thin luminous systems of intricate equations and patterns happening on these screens that I could not understand. And it was the first time I think I realized and began to think about how Atlantis wasn't just a singular lost city, because I think, I'd heard about Atlantis by then. I hadn't done any deep research or anything. But I knew that I had the Egyptian connection somehow. And I knew that had somehow to do with Atlantis. But I hadn't really put all the pieces together yet because I didn't have all the pieces yet. So I'm there, and I'm seeing all of this technology. I know it's like an outpost of Atlantis. And I'm like putting it together in my brain with the Egyptian stuff I'd seen before through the Sphinx and the portals there. And I was just, blown away. And I don't know how to talk about it. So anyway, that was my first inkling that Atlantis was widespread and not just like one drowned city. So moving on, this next astral projection I'm going to discuss happened after I had moved back to New York. So I was having a brutal bout of insomnia. How old was I? Late 30s, early 40s, I don't know. When my sleep schedule finally normalized. So thinking back, I think I was in my early 40s for this one. I projected into a very dense, heavy astral layer. I exited my bedroom window. I flew toward a nearby lake under a dark nighttime sky. So yeah, that puts me in my 40s somewhere. Down on the road below, things got really weird. There was a strange procession of people wrapped in bright white coverings that looked suspiciously like mummy sheets. It was so weird. And then a man with glowing golden hair tried to offer me some kind of substances or pills, psyches kind of stuff. I don't know. So I gave him a polite thanks, but no thanks. And I kept on moving. When the astral gets that dense, you have to stay sharp. You can get distracted really easily. At least I do in the denser realms sometimes. Sometimes I'll just kind of black out because it feels dense and heavy, and I don't really like it that much compared to the higher realms. So, and then I saw them. There were 2 golden stars, large ones, suspended over the lake, acting like directional markers. So I flew up to follow them, but I woke up. So the universe wasn't done with me that night. I immediately went back into a meditation practice using light visualizations and Green Tara mantras. And I was able to successfully astral project again. And I was focused on those 2 stars while I was doing these mantras and my light visualizations. So my brain knew that my intention was to go to the 2 stars, the 2 golden stars. And I projected right into the Sphinx. I hadn't even been asking for the Sphinx. So I'm at this point believing the 2 stars were like portals to the Sphinx. And the vibe was different though when I got there and I went through the Sphinx portal. Everything was older, ruined, and covered in sand. And so as I walked through, I say walked again. I keep like wanting to walk through the Sphinx. It's an ongoing theme, but I know I'm not walking, I'm floating. So anyway, I was going slower. Like there's like this time dilation in there or something, which makes me think about walking. And I was confronted by beings as I was exploring this area wearing Horus-like helmets. And these were big again, big like, I've seen in the past. So that part didn't surprise me, but the Horus-like helmets and everything, that was different. One of them came forward and straight up demanded my Atlantean identification. So here I was, see, and I'm already connecting this back to my earlier, like Pre-Atlantean / Egyptian, whatever you want to call them, experiences that began when I was younger. And he actually demanded my Atlantean identification. That word was used, Atlantean. Talk about weird cosmic customs. So I told him I didn't remember who I was in Atlantis or if I was in Atlantis. So what it did was it reached into my energetic structure. I mean, like my energy body. And I didn't fight this because I wanted to know too. I was like, what's this thing going to find? And it extracted the data directly. It was weird how it didn't. I didn't like see cords of energy or anything. I saw what I felt was like a blue wing / hand or something. And so I did see something like vaguely close to feathers maybe slipping into me, but softly. And the ID that popped up kind of blew me away. And it identified me, this Horus being identified me as a daughter of Oestrol, which is why I've named the episode like I have. And, remember, I have not recalled a lifetime being called a daughter of Oestrol or anything. But this being immediately cleared me for, the area. I was allowed to be there. And, I've encountered this kind of stuff before where you need permission to be in particular areas or some kind of references from friends, shifting IDs, photos. I also call this your astral ident. So, but this one was looking for my Atlantean ident. So that's where all the tingles and everything comes in. And again, this place was kind of a wasteland at this point. So I decided to ask the Horus guardian being, since, I'm allowed to be there now and it sees me as however it's seeing me, I don't know. But I asked it to remove its helmet so that I could see its true form. See, by then I was all about the true form. I was like, I want to see what's going on here. And it warned me. It said, not everyone likes what they see. And I insisted. I was like, really, I'm going to be okay with whatever I might see. And when the helmet came off, it wasn't biological at all. It looked like a living matrix of intricate floating, like artificial intelligence systems. Like, remember on the island that lady showed me? It was fluidic, like fluidic math, highly dimensional fluidic stuff I couldn't understand. But I immediately connected it back to that island again and Atlantis again. It was like, oh, okay, hear the math or a system within it, like the matrix, only the Atlantean matrix or something like that. And so this was living energetic architecture. Some people might call them tulpas, but this was way more advanced, I think. So I don't want to just label it as a tulpa. I mean, this thing was alive, but in a way that I couldn't understand looking at it the way I was. So it calmly put its Horus face there back on, the Horus mask, and went back to work, like just patrolling the area. Anyway, I kept on exploring. even though it was mostly all just barren land and old ruins and stuff. And I eventually met a woman who I'm not sure if she was a guide or just somebody that was there, but she showed me a glowing pink doorway into what she called the records of Atlantis, which I don't think were the full ones again. I think, again, these are kind of like a record outpost. So what happened was we stood on a massive crystalline bridge looking down at a sprawling, luminous city. It looked like a city to me, made of rose-colored structures, domes, and towers that looked like solid light and rose quartz. But it was all completely still. This was not an inhabited place, except by these crystals and these crystal matrices and these forms they were taking. And it felt like a perfectly preserved memory field. And she told me I could always return to the archive. And this is where it gets weird, and I think my brain messed up the interpretation. But she said I could return to that particular crystalline archive by traveling upward through the left eye of the Sphinx in the Astral. And then I woke up. So, like, you have to kind of make a curve in there, and it's like a mini portal inside a portal kind of deal. I have not been back there, or if I was, I don't remember it. I do my best to remember all of my astral projections, but there are still quite a few I don't remember. So moving on to 2022, when I was keeping much better journal notes. I'm calling this one the Dome World Outpost. Welcome to Atlantis. It says, I became lucid floating in what looked like a large bedroom, but when I turned on my 360-degree perception, I realized I was inside a massive, contained biosphere. A dome world stretching on for miles inside this dome. The sky was a blend of pale blues, hazy pinks, and violets, surrounded by massive, dark evergreen trees on a scale that felt Jupiterian to me. Like, they were massive. I'm sure they weren't Jupiter massive, actually, but that's how they felt. And inside the room where I became lucid, a female of some type made a soft white mist and was resting on a bed next to two books. So I neatly moved the books to a dresser, because apparently even when I'm astral projecting, I like to tidy up. And I floated out into a gleaming white and gold hallway. I met a different woman in a white nightgown who naturally assumed I belonged there. So I don't know how long I had been there by the time I became lucid or what, but they were used to me being around. She invited me outside to look for historical artifacts in the ruins. So again, with the ruins, to use as gifts for an ongoing festival that I guess everybody was celebrating. And so I'm still there, like, trying to stabilize and figure this out. But I agreed to go look for the artifacts. So we transitioned seamlessly through a wall to the outside, where the landscape was littered with ancient, partially collapsed structures. So ruins. I spotted something smooth embedded in a wall. So I pulled it out. It was the size about of an ostrich egg. And with her help, we both focused on it. Its outer layers dissolved as we both focused on it, revealing an antique-looking vessel covered in unfamiliar inscriptions. Now, the woman I was with telepathically interpreted it. She was really excited, and she was going on about it being a Japanese antique coffee pot. But to me, it looked entirely alien and nothing like a coffee pot, Japanese or otherwise. So that's a perfect example of how two consciousnesses can interpret the exact same thing differently based on your own perception about things. So we took the artifact back to this dome. Well, everything was in the dome. So back to the building. In a massive auditorium, she was showing me the auditorium. And inside there was a super giant evergreen tree, like the ones outside, but a really nice one. And hundreds of beings were gathering of different sorts and luminous forms. I remember there was a 9-foot tall figure with flowing dark hair and a green wreath robe who smiled and gestured toward various symbolic gifts, including a moving metallic device and a wooden windmill, a tiny, small, intricately done, like with little gears and everything, wooden windmill. So we took what we had found and placed it over there in that general area. So I remember, I think I might have blacked out for a little while and then became lucid again, because I remember my focus blurring. And then I remember I was exploring again, and I phased outside the actual dome. Like, remember the whole place, even the big trees and everything are in a dome. So this is also like a consensus area. Sometimes people call these consensus areas where everybody is contributing to the energy of the area. But I wanted to see like where else in the universe we were. Or I was. So I was trying to fly higher. So I phased through the actual sheath of the consensus area dome. And not long after, I hit what felt like a literal wall of energetic resistance. And there was this voice, I don't know if it was my higher self or another one, told me to use a portal instead. And that sounds kind of like something I would tell myself, I have to admit. And so I quickly intended for a portal to go through. A gray vortex-like tornado appeared. And portals can appear like anything to me. Sometimes they're a blur. Sometimes they're like a spiral or a bright moon or a wall just lights up. Or in this case, a whole, tornado. So I jumped in the tornado. And I was instantly underwater. I want to say splash, but there wasn't a splash. I was just suddenly in water, enveloped, warm. It was warm water, like tropical water. And I had to remind myself immediately, hey, astral bodies don't need to breathe. It's okay. I'm in the water. It's okay. And so I was stabilizing, like just focus on how good it feels to be in the water, like the best warm bath ever or something. And as the colors were filling in, I saw that I was in a submerged marble corridor with stones also, gray stones and marble. And there was a blonde man down in there, and he was pointing to a wall. Now remember, I can't always hear very well in the astral, so he was pointing to a wall for me, covered in what looked like Egyptian hieroglyphs that lit up in gold as I approached. And then when I was close enough, he took my hands to help stabilize me, and so I could hear him. Sometimes touching helps me to be able to hear people in the astral. And he smiled and said, "Welcome to Atlantis. Just float or swim upward." And he also was using motions to point upward. Like, that's the way to go. Go up. So I already, knew that I had been in Atlantis. I was wondering, what else am I going to see tonight? And I swam up through a tunnel of light. Like there was sunlight on the water, actually, I think is what it was. But it seemed like a tunnel too, like because of all the way the structures were down in there. And I emerged into a bright open city pool area. So not even the ocean. I came up in somebody's pool. And the whole place looked like it was surrounded by towering skyscrapers. And before I could explore this new layer, I lost my stability and woke up. So I don't know if that was just like my exit to a random city, or if it was a whole nother layer or dimension of Atlantis. And I feel like the welcome to Atlantis was just to like solidify in my mind that, yeah, that's where I had been, another outpost. Only this other outpost had been on another planet with the tall beings and everything. So that's all I have to report on that one. I don't know all the time what to make about all of this. And, I just do the best I can to relay the information. Oh, and I think now is a good time to point out for those that are newer to all of this that sometimes when the memories are flooding back in, the order can be a little messy. Like sometimes you remember bits just kind of out of sync. So the welcome to Atlantis could have actually happened before, and then when my mind was reconstructing the memory, maybe tucked it in there after the fact. I really just don't know, but I know that I got all the download of information. So moving on, this last one was more recent, from January 2025. And I've called it the Healing Hall's Quantum Recalibration. So this was entirely different from, the other experiences I've had. It wasn't about exploring ruins or talking to ancient guardians of the realm. It felt, in this case, like Atlantis as an environment was interacting with me as its own intelligent system. So I became lucid. I had spontaneously astral projected. I became lucid in what I'm calling the halls of Atlantis, or the healing halls. I don't remember what I had intended when I was falling asleep that night, if anything. Sometimes my experiences are purely spontaneous, even if I make no intention. So there were no buildings or landscapes here, just tall, luminous columns, radiant walls, and a distinct vibrational hum that I could feel in my energy body. I've experienced this before in different places, at different levels. And the architecture here was the message itself. The environment possessed a distributed ambient kind of intelligence. So I drifted through the space and I found what appeared to be a simple wooden swing decorated with white flowers, just hanging in midair. Like the swing, the sides of it went up and everything, but it wasn't hanging from anything. It was just hanging there in midair. So, I sat down on it. I thought, okay, this is a way to interact. And I swung gently, enjoying the grounded motion. I say the grounded motion because I remember it felt very relaxing, but also I was moving. So, and after that began, a luminous figure of pure light appeared. Without words, it offered to transform the swing, and I agreed. I didn't know what it was going to do with the thing, but I wanted to go along with the experience. So I agreed, sure, change it. And it shifted into a glowing bed of light. So I lay back in this super comfortable bed, and then I noticed it really wasn't like a plushy bed. It was mercurial. I have it described here as mercurial, silver, liquid-like energy wrapping me in a cozy cocoon. So again, with this liquid technology that I've been describing in here the whole time. And it was a field of pure, what I'm calling quantum recalibration. And then a clear internal message echoed, you can drop the heaviness. So I floated slightly above the bed, the silver cocoon dissolved, and I saw fragments of dark density and old energetic patterns kind of like just slopping off of me, like mud or something, and metal and all this other stuff. And just dispersing beneath me, like it was just getting processed and dropped. It was being processed by being dropped. And I didn't feel a loss, just, release and relief. So I don't think we always realize how much emotional baggage we carry, I guess, until an advanced energy field vacuums it off of us or tells us to drop it, into a high-tech machine of some kind. That bed was a machine. It was an Atlantean machine. So my mind was just interpreting it like swing then bed, but it was just a way to describe the whole thing. So the halls themselves remained steady, and I said deeply responsive as I slowly faded back into waking awareness. So now, to put it all together, I'm calling this final reflection the multi-layered matrix. Looking back across all of these experiences, the patterns are undeniable. Atlantis, at least for me, keep in mind, I know I'm just sharing my own experiences and others may have different ones, and that's great. But for me, Atlantis, over the years, hasn't been just a physical place that sank into an ocean. It behaves like a structured, multi-layered system of environments, intelligences, and interfaces, including that weird liquid tech. So thinking about the recurring elements, the Sphinx portal as a universal gateway, the advanced recurring liquid-like technology, the energetic passport system, identifying me as a daughter of Oestrol, whoever that is, because again, I have not remembered that lifetime. The transition between dome worlds, submerged corridors, and cities of solid rose light. And finally, the direct energetic healing in the halls. So as my own awareness evolved over the years, the way Atlantis interfaced with me changed too. It went from a geographic exploration to more of a bureaucratic security checkpoint there, to a dome world expedition, and finally to a state of pure non-physical energetic recalibration. So whether we interpret this psychologically, archetypically, or metaphysically, Atlantis, for me anyway, consistently presents itself as a multi-layered field of structured intelligence. It reveals a different layer depending entirely on context and state of consciousness. Thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Astral Tourist. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever encountered similar structures or symbols? Have you seen aspects of Atlantis or the Akashic records or crystal records? Until next time, happy astral travels. Lots of love to everybody. Thank you so much.